and get started. Thank you so much for joining us and welcome to today's session, Embracing Winter Wellness, Navigating the Season with Mindful Practices. My name is Jackie Zimmerman. I'm the manager of our public education partnerships and e-learning, and I'll be moderating today's session. I have a few notes for everyone before I introduce our speaker for today. This webinar is being recorded and will be emailed out to all participants within 1 week. We currently do not offer CEUs, but if you would like a certificate of attendance, we have a form that you can complete to request one of those. I'll post the link to that form in the chat here shortly, and that will also be included in your follow-up email. We are so thrilled for our first webinar of the year to be joined by Israa Nasir. To introduce our speaker, Israa is a psychotherapist, speaker, and founder of the digital mental health brand Well Guide. Israa creates meaningful experiences through therapy, workshops, engaging creative content, and speaking engagements to further amplify the message of emotional wellness and personal growth. Her work is focused on transforming the way we talk about mental health, taking it from a place of shame to a place of empowerment, with specific focus on identity formation and healing for the AAPI immigrant first and second generation experience. Her previous clients include, but aren't limited to Columbia University, the NYPD, Google, Mental Health America, Pepsi, Ernst & Young, Meta, and Yale University. Israa holds a MA in mental health counseling from the Derner Institute in New York, and she currently lives in New York City and is working on her debut book, scheduled to be published in 2024, on toxic productivity. You can connect with Israa and learn more about her work on israhnasir.com or on Instagram at WellGuide, and we will be sure to include her contact information in our follow-up email too. But thank you, Israa. Welcome. We are so grateful that you're able to join us here today, leading us in this very important and relevant topic as we start the new year. And for many across the US are experiencing heavy winters, cold temperatures, the effects of seasons are upon us and our mental health. And it's also January, which for a lot of people feel the pressures of starting a new year and setting those goals and different things. So we're just really glad that you're here to kind of help us talk through how we can be intentional about really being supportive and thoughtful about our mental health this season.
Well, thank you so much, Jackie, for the introduction. I really appreciate being here. I think this topic is very, very important. Definitely for me as well. I was telling you earlier when we were chatting before this presentation that, it's so important to be mindful, intentional about how you're going to care for your mental wellness and your overall well-being. So we will be talking about that today. I'll start off by sharing my screen so we can dive right in. We will have a little bit of a Q&A portion at the end. So if you have any questions throughout the session, please feel free to drop it in the chat box. Jackie is going to be monitoring it. And, if anything pressing comes up in the middle, Jackie, please, if someone has a question about what I'm saying, just pause me and I'll answer the question. If not, we'll have a good discussion at the end. So before we dive into the things that I want to talk about today, I'll start off by very quickly, telling everyone who I am. But Jackie, you really knocked the intro out of the park. So my name is Israa. I'm a trained therapist. I've been a therapist for about 10 years, and I work in both private practice and the digital wellness space. And, if you want to reach out to me, please, find me on Instagram or send me an email through my website. I love chatting with people, especially as follow-ups for our presentations. So please don't hesitate at all. I'll dive right into what we're talking about today. So today, we're essentially having an overall discussion on how we can thrive in the winter season. So, we're going to talk a little about why seasonal changes matter and what does that even mean, like both at a mental level and a physiological level and a social level. And then we'll talk about a commonly used phrase, seasonal affective disorder, which is a true mental health condition. So I really want to go into kind of delineating the difference between seasonal affective disorder and feeling sad. And so that we know we are approaching our wellness from a place of information. And then we'll talk about something that I think a lot of people are feeling I think last Monday or yesterday is often called like Blue Monday. It's meant to be or called to be the saddest day of the year. And so we'll talk a little about why that can happen, what the post-holiday blues are. And then most of the discussion, I think, about like the second half will really be about coping. So how do we cope with the post-holiday blues? How do we cope throughout the season until spring begins? And then we'll have a little bit of a discussion. And like I said, no question is too little or too silly. Please absolutely send your questions. This is your time to learn a little bit more about this topic. So before we go into what seasonal changes are, I want you to take just a few seconds to really think about your intention for being here. And if you have something that you can write on, just kind of write it down, or if it's on your phone, on the Notes app, just really think about why you're here and what you're hoping to take away. On my end, my biggest hope in this session is that you take away knowing that feeling a little down in the winter season is a very normal physiological reaction that we have in our mental health. And it is something that when we implement changes in our habits, we can change the way we're feeling. So I think that's like the biggest thing I want you to take away is that, yes, it is, to a certain degree, very normal to feel sad in the seasons of like, especially January to March. And also that you have the power to change how you feel by changing your habits and changing your routine, just being, a little more intentional about some wellness practices that we'll talk about today. And just know that, because I know that this season can be very challenging for people, especially for those who already struggle with a mental health condition. The winter season can kind of exacerbate those symptoms. So just kind of keep in mind why you're here. As we continue in the presentation, I will be sharing, winter-related journal prompts. So definitely please try to think about them, answer them, and really see how this stuff can be relevant to you. All right. So what is a seasonal change? What is the impact of seasonal change? The biggest one, it's already on the screen, is reduced daylight. So we know, the Earth goes through these 4 seasons, and every season changes the amount of sunlight that we experience. And because we are also living organisms just like plants, we react to the amount of sunlight that we have in our life. And, when the days become shorter, when the season changes, that actually creates a pretty significant shift in the chemicals in our brain that affect our mood. So things like serotonin and dopamine which are known as the happiness hormones, are very quickly impacted by shortened days. They are very quickly impacted by the lack of sunlight. I'm in New York right now, and it is so gray that like the sun cannot even be peeking through. Some of the tops of the buildings are still clouded, right? And what that does is it changes the micro level chemistry, just like day to day, and also throughout the whole season of your mind. The other thing that reduced sunlight does is that it lowers your vitamin D levels. So at a very physiological level, we are experiencing a change in our body. Vitamin D is also really important when it comes to managing our mental health and our mood and our energy. So that is one of the biggest impact of seasonal change. The other is the very natural one. It's cold. You are less likely to want to go outside unless you're kind of like a winter snowbird person. Sometimes it can be very challenging to go out for a run because the roads are icy. Maybe you can no longer play, soccer in the league because you were playing outdoors. So cold weather can really limit how much physical activity we're getting outside, and that can impact how we feel. The third one is holiday stress. So we're coming off like December season. It's very stressful with so much happening, New Year's and Christmas and end of year work stuff. And there's a lot of pressure on needing to be happy in December, at least for the social media photos and all of that. And there's a lot of comparison happening in the holiday season. You're looking at how other people are celebrating the holiday and maybe comparing yourself. And so all of that creates this like residual like tension. And as soon as the holiday ends, we're just kind of left with all of those feelings. And so that causes the post-holiday blues. We're away from our families. January to March, we don't really have a lot of holidays to look forward to. And so that can really kind of lower the mood. A really big one, especially in the last 4 years, has been, immune system risk. So as it gets colder, we are more likely to get sick. And that can create some tension. It can cause some fear. If you do end up getting sick, it's kind of annoying and, it might impact your plans. Right now, we are hearing of COVID on the rise, and I'm starting to hear anxiety about, I'm making travel plans, what's going to happen, like those kind of things. So that can also cause a level of stress. And then a really big one, because of all of these reasons, is there is a disruption of our routines. So for 3 quarters of the year, like in the 3 seasons, we kind of establish a routine around waking up, working out, eating, going out, all of those things. And as soon as the weather changes, it disrupts our routine. Now, maybe you're waking up and it's still dark outside, and you're leaving work and it's still dark outside. And it feels like, you don't really want to go out. You might have less motivation to work out. Maybe it's raining and now your plans are canceled. And so there is this like feeling of needing to resettle, right? But of course, you layer in the new year, and we are kind of entering the new year, and we're like, we're going to change all of our routines. And it's difficult to find that structure under all of this pressure. All of this combined can really lead to something that is very common in the winter season, which is people start reporting that they're feeling lonelier. They are feeling more disconnected. They feel like they want to go out, but they don't want to go out, right? They want to see their friends, but they don't have the energy. And that can really, really impact your mental well-being. Of course, like if you already struggle with a mental health issue, it can exacerbate the symptoms. And even if you don't struggle with a mental health issue, the impact of the reduced daylight and the lack of activity and all of those things can really make you feel lonely and isolated, which is why it's so important that we are talking about this right now, right at the beginning of the year, so that we can all be mindful about managing these things, right? So a lot of the things on the screen right now are out of our control. Like we can't really control how much daylight there is in the sky. And we can try to boost our immune system, but it's really challenging not to get sick if everyone around you is getting sick, right? What we do have control over is our routine, our structure, our sense of connection. And so that's really where we're going to focus on building some skills. So one of the things I want you to take a moment to think about is when we think about winter, we often think of solitude, right? If you close your eyes and you think of winter, it's like snowy cabin, fire in the fireplace. And a lot of people kind of think of solitude. So if you can just take like 1 or 2 seconds to think about how the solitude of winter makes you feel. And I encourage you to name 1 or 2 things that are empowering and feel good, and 1 or 2 things that you struggle with or you don't like, so that we can kind of think about where you have to focus your energy when it comes to making a plan for yourself. So I'll give you just like 2 seconds while I drink some water. Any thoughts in the chat right now, Jackie, that you think we might want to respond to?
We have quite a few comments that have been happening throughout, just that the solitude of winter, they're noticing more signs of depression,
Mm-hmm.
of feeling isolated or lonely. We have a
Mm-hmm.
few people saying learning something new or finding stillness, finding peace and quiet. Some are feeling tired.
Mm-hmm.
Um, leaving behind the old, looking forward to the new, having to change routine of not being outside and moving their bodies still.
Awesome. All right. These are all great. Soup season. I just saw that. Oh my gosh. I'm
Yeah.
a fan of soup season. I think it is truly one of the most nourishing activities. But yeah, we will talk about a lot of these coping skills later on in the session. I saw someone asking about vitamin D supplements. One of the things we'll talk about is why in the beginning of the year, especially around this winter time, it's so important to set up your medical appointments. And, talking to your provider about supplements, whether it's vitamin D or magnesium or whatever they recommend that is related to mood, that is, natural, is definitely a really important thing. And you can definitely do that, but we'll talk more about that later. All right. So let's go into seasonal affective disorder. And I know that a lot of people have likely heard of this, but I want to kind of start off by saying that seasonal affective disorder is a mental health condition. You can get diagnosed for it from a provider, and you can take mental health medication to support your symptoms. Um, that being said, it is something that if you do feel any of the signs that I'll be talking about right now, my recommendation is definitely talk to a doctor about it. It is something that happens commonly, but it is temporary. It is based on the seasons. So let's first talk about a couple of symptoms that are very common here. First is you've noticed that as the season has changed, you are feeling a low mood that's kind of lasting for most of the day, nearly every day. Like that's kind of like the baseline is most of the day, nearly every day. Like you're thinking that, I used to feel a little bad. Like there's no reason for me to feel this kind of like blah, lethargic sadness. And so that's something to kind of be mindful of. And let's kind of, think about it in the last 2 to 3 weeks of your life. Like that's really like the gauge. If you go to a doctor, they'll say, how long? They're looking for at least 2 weeks. And then the stuff that you used to find enjoyable, like perhaps like watching shows or cooking, like you just don't have the energy for, and you're starting to feel a little like disconnected from the things that gave you joy. And then there is a marked decrease in your energy. So if you're sleeping, like let's say you're falling asleep at the same time every day for 2 weeks, but you're still waking up, tired and groggy, and that you're getting like 8 hours of sleep. Now there's like a little bit of an indication that, hey, like something is probably a little amiss because I'm sleeping, but I'm not getting any rest. Now, a lot of these symptoms do feel like the symptoms of depression. So seasonal affective disorder falls under the umbrella of mood disorders. And that's why if you are struggling for a 2 week period with most of the day, nearly everyday symptoms, it is so important to speak to a medical professional, because they will then do the delineation to see whether these are true depression symptoms or if it's seasonal affective. All of these changes lead to changes in your habit. So other habitual like symptoms to look out for are changes in sleep pattern. So you're having a hard time falling asleep, or you wake up in the middle of the night, or you wake up right before your alarm consistently, or you are oversleeping. And it's not, let's say, in your regular habit to sleep for like, on the weekends, or like sleep through your alarm, but now you're finding that you're accidentally doing that. And so I think that's a pretty big sign, is when things are changing. Leading it with that, like there are changes in appetite. Now you are noticing that you're skipping meals and you're not that hungry anymore, or you're, kind of reaching for, salty snacks or a lot of sweets, or you're kind of eating more than you need to. So you're eating beyond the point of feeling full, or you're emotional eating, or you're mindlessly eating, or you're mindlessly skipping meals. There's a marked change in the way you are nourishing your body. And that happens because when we are like starting to feel some kind of overwhelm or disruption in our mental health, our body becomes stressed, and it releases stress hormones, which can disrupt how hungry you feel and how much you can sleep, right? these things can cause a lot of cognitive issues. So, and in today's world, it's very common to hear that people have a hard time focusing, predominantly because of like the Instagram, TikTok scrolls and the short, like 7-second videos. And our brains are having a harder time focusing. So that's kind of like a baseline. But if you're noticing that you are different from your baseline, where if you were able to focus for one TV show, right, like one 45-minute TV show, now you're noticing that you're picking up your phone like 6 times in one episode, right? That's different from your baseline. So you have to think about like, okay, based on how much I can regularly focus, am I having a hard time focusing? Can I concentrate? Can I just focus on one thing, or do I get distracted very easily, right? Thinking about that again in the last 2 weeks is really helpful in recognizing whether you're struggling with seasonal affective or not. And of course, like if you're not eating well, if you're not sleeping well, if you're lacking focus, you're going to be irritable. You're going to be snappy. Like you're going to be quick to kind of like snap at people or getting into arguments and just like overall in like a curmudgeonly bad mood. And that can be an indicator that something is off balance. Now, the thing to remember about these like 7 symptoms that I just talked about is that they are happening in the absence of a activating event. So if nothing has changed in your life, you haven't had a big transition, like you've lost a job or a relationship ended, or you just became a new parent. Like if nothing major has shifted, but you're starting to feel these changes and it kind of coincides with the weather changing and the holiday ending, like that's really when I want you to kind of start thinking about like, hey, maybe something is wrong. Because you'll see a lot of these symptoms are really normal things if you have a life transition, right? If you've just become a new parent, it's very likely that you're not sleeping well. It's very likely that you have no focus. It's very likely that you're skipping meals or you're irritated or you're overwhelmed. So really think about this. Like, are these changes happening in my mind and my body in the absence of an activating event? This is a really important note for anybody who's on here. Seasonal affective disorder, especially if you have a pre-existing mental health condition like a mood disorder, can activate suicidal thoughts or ideation or even action. So that's why it's so important to be mindful of this stuff. I know on social media, people kind of throw around the word like seasonal affective or like winter blues. But for a subset of the population, this can be a very serious condition. And, if you or somebody is starting to kind of struggle with thoughts of hopelessness, or really not able to care for themselves, really isolated, or having thoughts of death or self-harm, please seek professional help immediately. Please call your nearest urgent care, crisis hotline, 911, go to your urgent walk-in. This is something that's really important, that you care for yourself or the people around you, because this can lead to a serious consequence. Okay, we're going to shift gears a little bit. Yes, or 988. Thank you for saying that, Elizabeth. That's also a crisis hotline. So let's take a beat, to think about, is there a memory you have from, your past where you stayed indoors and unexpectedly it was a lovely evening or day? I often think about like snow days when we were younger, and now with distance learning, I think a lot of schools don't actually do snow days anymore, and you just kind of log into Zoom, which is tragic loss of a childhood memory. But, I think of that. Like, I think of this like snow day and you're home and like, you've kind of have all this time. So when we think about winter and we get sad about it, one of the things that often comes up, especially in my work, I often hear from my clients, is being indoors. And as I said earlier, like being indoors is a consequence of seasonal change that does affect our well-being. So one of the ways we can kind of build resilience in the time of winter so that we can thrive is to reframe how we feel about the indoors. And so thinking back on childhood memories or positive experiences indoors can really help unlock some creativity for yourself that you can kind of engage in again so that being indoors doesn't feel like a prison sentence. Someone just shared that they like cleaning and reorganizing. And I think that is definitely very cathartic and relaxing for a lot of people. So even if you take like one area of your home and you tidy it up or like reorganize the pantry or your closet, that can be a really fulfilling indoor winter activity. It can also help you purge for the spring ahead. Playing board games, I think that's a great one for sure. Reading a great book and staying in a cozy blanket, baking. So something my friends did recently that I'll share here, it was a snowy night and they decided to do like the Great British Bake Off amongst friends. And it was like the most wholesome activity, right? Like they broke into teams and did like baking and then they did the judging and it was just really, really fun. Um, so yeah, so there's a lot of things that we can do at home. And one of the things I would encourage you to do as you think about creating your toolkit for winter is to think about what are the things you can do at home. And having those things handy. So if making puzzles is something you want to do, keep puzzles at home. If board games are a thing you want to do with your family, keep those at home. Make sure you have hot chocolate at home or you have these teas at home so that when it is dreadful outside, you have your, toolkit that you can lean into and then you can engage in. So next, we're going to talk a little about something that's really important, which is the difference between SAD or SAD. So SAD in capitals is seasonal affective disorder. I don't think that they intentionally meant to have the acronym for that, but I think it applies and it works. But what is the difference between SAD or SAD, right? What is the difference between seasonal affective disorder and feeling sad? And I really want to normalize that feeling sad is an appropriate reaction after the holidays. And when, things are changing, it's gloomy outside. So I don't want to pathologize feeling sad, but it is important to know the distinction. So, you'll get these slides afterwards and there are those 7 symptoms of seasonal affective. Like, I really want you to think about, am I experiencing just feeling sad or am I actually experiencing these symptoms 2 to 3 weeks, most of the day, nearly every day? So the first one is the duration and the recurrence of the symptoms. If you are struggling with seasonal affective disorder, you are probably feeling this way every year. So every year in the fall, winter, you start to notice these changes. And when we think about like really diagnosing it, we are going to go back asking in the last 2 years minimum. So if you go right now and you're like, hey, I'm feeling these changes, all of these things. The doctor might be like, did you feel this last year? Did you feel this the year before? Have you always felt this way in the winter season, right? They're going to try to see this history and how often the symptoms recur. If you're feeling sad, it might be temporary. You might feel it for 1 week and then not the other, and then the week again and not the other. Or you might have it for an evening, but not really. And there's no predictability to your symptoms. And another thing is oftentimes if you reflect, you'll note that there's something in that had just happened. You had a bad day at work and now you're feeling extra bummy because it's bad outside. You can't go out and you just had a horrible day at work. And so thinking about the duration and how often it recurs is a really important distinction between seasonal affective and feeling sad. The other one is the intensity of symptoms. This one is really, really important. So when we have seasonal affective, the intensity of the symptom is really extreme. Like I'm talking, you are not able to get out of bed in the morning. You are late to work. You are skipping the morning meeting. You are late to pick up your kids because you took a nap in the afternoon because you were so fatigued. You are, revenge bedtime, procrastination, scrolling at nighttime till 2 o'clock in the morning. Like it's a very intensely disruptive experience. Whereas feeling sad is kind of like high functioning, like you're able to do the things that you're meant to do. You are just kind of feeling this heaviness or disconnectedness alongside doing the things. that kind of leads into the impact it has on your daily life. So if you were to talk to a doctor about it, this is one of the questions they'd ask you is, how is this actually impacting your life? Have you forgotten to pay bills because you were just so overwhelmed by lack of energy that you were like, oh, whatever, like I'll do this later? Is there a pile of dishes in your sink that's been there for a couple of days? Do you not have the energy to open your mail? Let's say you were having a really great date and you were dating this like person for a couple of weeks, and like now you're feeling so tired and disconnected that you're just kind of ghosting them and ignoring them because you just don't have the energy. Like that's a pretty significant impact. If you are feeling sad, it might impact one area of your life and not the rest, and you're kind of able to kind of manage. And you notice that, if you change some of your behaviors, it changes how you feel. So your behavior changes are impacting how you feel, and in a positive way. And so that, I think, is a really important distinction as well. And I think we talked about this a couple of slides ago, but there is a consistency of symptoms when it comes to seasonal affective. So you're going to feel it consistently every fall, every winter. You might notice that, right around Christmas or New Year's, you start to feel a certain way every year. Other people in your life might make comments like that, right? Like they might say things like, oh, last year you were feeling really bummy about like New Year's as well. And sometimes the people around us can be a really helpful indicator of what's going on with us, the people who are safe and the people who we trust, because they can become cognizant or become aware of our patterns because they're around us. So they might notice that, oh, every year right around New Year's, you become like really withdrawn or you kind of go MIA, right? So there's a consistent pattern to your symptoms. Whereas feeling sad is just kind of like all over the place. Even you can't predict it. You might wake up one day, a gray day like today, and you're like, I feel fine, like it's okay. Whereas tomorrow, it's like a little rainy and it's kind of stressing you out or making you overwhelmed or anxious. So this was pretty important. Are there any questions on difference between seasonal affective or asking a doctor or anything like that? Alrighty. Oh, someone made a really important comment that I definitely want to highlight here. Seasonal affective absolutely is a treatable condition. It is also temporary. That is like by its nature that it's temporary. And just because you have it like a couple of years, it doesn't mean that you're always going to have it. It is something that is so unique to each person. So if you do struggle with it or you think you're struggling with, just know that like that's why being with a mental health professional is the most important thing, because yes, you can Google it, absolutely. And you can try all the behavioral things we'll talk about, but it is going to be unique to you. And so that's why having somebody who, let's go to our next prompt. Wintertime can feel a little like lacking traditions. Zachariah, I see your question and I will answer it afterwards because it's a really good question. The question is, how do you differentiate SAD from depression or seasonal affective from depression? But coming back to this, after the holidays, especially in the stretch of January to April, we don't really have a lot of like community traditions. And December, like November to December, like with Thanksgiving to New Year's, is just like jammed with family traditions or community traditions. And, we have Friendsgivings and we do things with our coworkers and we have like white elephants and Thanksgiving and all of those things. And they give us a really strong sense of connection and community. And connection and community is like vital to our well-being. We talk about self-care, but self-care really in its truest, most original form is community care. We can't only be looking inwards. We have to be looking outwards to the people around us. And we see a lot of that in November and December. So it's like almost on overdrive. And then from January to like Easter, it feels like there's nothing. There's like a gap. And then we are kind of like struggling because we feel very isolated. Everyone is like kind of like overwhelmed with a lot of the community, feelings that you had in December. So that's why I like to encourage my clients who struggle with this, as well as I do this myself, is what are some winter traditions that you can create with your community, whether it's your family, your friends, your chosen family, your coworkers, your neighbors, whoever it is, but is there something that you can build into your January to April like calendar that makes you feel a sense of community and connection with others? Someone just said Super Bowl party, but spelled like soup, which I absolutely love. Faye, and I think I might steal it if you don't mind. I will absolutely be hosting that. So you make a soup competition with your friends. How amazing. Celebrating Galentine's, that is an excellent tradition with community and friends. Shoveling for a neighbor, there is so much power in being kind to other people, right? So, like when we are kind to other people, we experience like hormonal changes. It releases oxytocin, it releases serotonin and dopamine, and that actually like lifts your mood. And so, whether you volunteer at a soup kitchen or you, volunteer to shovel your neighbor's snow. I think that's a great, great, winter tradition. Winter cabin trip, vision board party. Oh my gosh, I love those. Vision board parties are especially excellent for the dark, dreary nights. Get people together, have some food and drinks, music, and kind of plan your year together. These are so excellent, by the way. All of them I really love. Someone said they don't have any winter traditions. I hope that this conversation can inspire you and anyone who's listening, inspire you to kind of borrow some of these, because I know that I'm definitely going to be borrowing soup or bowl. Okay. Let's talk about the post-holiday blues in the last portion of this session. And I think the first thing we have to recognize that it is not out of the norm to feel this way. It is really common. It's very natural because of the changes in your mental chemistry, not just because of the lack of sunlight, but also the lack of like connection that actually changes how we are operating on the inside. And so if you are feeling kind of blah, I would encourage you to not immediately jump to pathologizing it, because I think we are very quick to kind of label things as syndromes or illnesses, but there is a breadth of sadness that is normal, that is natural. And a lot of people feel this post-holiday blues. So definitely, that's why it's so important to be mindful of like the symptoms and the severity and the intensity, so that you can realize that, hey, like I'm just feeling sad. Like I'm just feeling bummed out. I have like no idea when I'm going on vacation next, or there are no more long weekends or whatever, right? Like I think in this, like, especially in the pop psych, social media, like digital wellness age, we've kind of removed the spectrum of negative feelings. You're either feeling good or you're not, but there is a middle place where it's normal to feel sad, and that's a human experience. So the first thing you want to do for the post-holiday blues is you have to be realistic in your expectations. This is one that I'm practicing this year for sure. A lot of times we come from the post-holiday and we're like, yeah, January, I'm going to change my life. And that's just unrealistic. There is no reason that you are going to become magically a different person because the date is different. So you have to be very realistic. It might take you some time to adjust to new habits. I like to do the slow roll. And so instead of like committing, so for me, like instead of committing to go to the gym every single day, I usually will be like, okay, I'm going to start off with 3 days a week for this month, and then bump it up and like really build this like slow habit change, because that's just way more realistic. So know that it's going to take you a couple of weeks weeks to get out of this like funk of, the holiday fun. And I actually like to think of January as a warm-up month. Like I never consider January like the month to get started. January is like my warm-up month. Like I'm warming up, and I'm building slowly these habits and these changes. The other thing you want to think about, as I was just kind of talking about, is ease back into your regular routine gradually. Like again, think of it like a warm up, right? If you're working out, you stretch first. So think about like the first couple of weeks of January as that. Consider like phasing your changes. Like consider, you know, let's say the first week out of January, you were like, okay, like I'm just gonna stay at home and like reorganize myself and whatever, and then kind of go back into your social life and then slowly go back into like, your other routines. And that way you're not really overwhelming yourself with abrupt changes. And finally, this is a really good one from what we were talking about just a few minutes ago with the traditions, is plan these things because there is not a lot to look forward to when it comes to like this January to April months. So anticipate events and activities, like plan small gatherings like Galentine's, right? It's January 16th. Maybe start thinking about a Galentine's in a couple of weeks so that you can have something happening that day. Or, plan a mini day trip or something like that, or a dinner, or a personal project. And this personal project does not have to be monetized. It does not have to be optimized. It doesn't have to be like your side hustle. It can just be a hobby or something you're doing for the sake of joy. And this will create excitement for the future. So you have some structure. And again, anything you're anticipating, do it in a gradually like phased way. Don't try to do all of it at the same time. That is just truly so overwhelming. And, I'll share one thing about myself that I'm doing this year is I literally am taking the whole month of January to create like my year roadmap or vision board, whatever you want to call it. Like I'm doing this the whole month. Like every week I like add a little to it and I create a little bit more. I finesse the goals a little bit or how I'm going to do it or what's important to me. Instead of like trying to like smush it all into the first week, like that is just too much pressure. So post-holiday blues, acknowledge that it's normal. It's normal to feel sad, be realistic, be gradual and phase out your changes and make small plans so that you have something to look forward to. Very quickly is, the winter solstice is such an interesting thing for me to celebrate. I find it to be like such a beautiful celebration. And I know that I think it happened in December, but it's something that we can think about like as a New Year thing as well, because winter solstice can sometimes be a symbol for new beginnings. So just kind of thinking about how in winter time you can really make some changes that can be totally new for you. And that can be very exciting. These prompts, I pulled off a list called Winter Journal Prompts, and I'll send the link out when Jackie sends everything. It had some of the most beautiful winter like prompts. And I know that I'm going to be using some of them, but think about like, can this time be a time for new beginnings for me? So very quickly, now we're going to talk about coping. This is just overall winter wellness, right? These are small habit changes you can make in your day-to-day that will help you feel better consistently. And when I say small, like I literally mean small. You don't have to work out for an hour every single day for it to be impactful. You don't have to journal for 30 minutes. You don't have to like meditate for 30 minutes. You can have micro goals. So these can be micro goals for you. So try to maximize sunlight exposure as much as you can. If you do have like a diagnosis of seasonal affective disorder or depression, you can get a prescription for a sun lamp, which mimics sunlight. And sometimes insurance can cover it. But if you don't have that, or if you don't want that lamp, if it's a sunny day, try to get out, even if it's for 10 minutes. Literally, that makes a difference because it's essentially like charging your battery. We're like solar panels. Like we go outside, it charges our batteries by increasing vitamin D, which impacts a lot of our, body's chemistry. So if you can't go out, sit by a window. If you have a window, try to work outside if you can. And definitely stay active. So active doesn't mean working out only. It can be going to a dance class. It can be choosing to walk back with your groceries instead of taking a cab if you live close enough, taking the stairs versus the escalator if you're able to. Like all of these little ways that you can increase activity, but definitely stay active. The instinct is to hibernate in the wintertime because we too are mammals and many mammals hibernate in the wintertime. So we do want to like kind of be cozy. And so that's why I try to find ways to be active any way that you can. Having an accountability partner or a friend to be active with is also a really good way to do that. The second set I'm going to talk about is establish a routine. Now, after the December holiday, our routines are all over the place. You know, we're not sleeping well, we're not eating well, we're just like all over the place, and that's fine. Enjoy the holidays, that's amazing. But in the month of January, take the whole month to establish new habits or reestablish the old ones. Like if you were somebody who used to go to bed by 11 and the holidays totally like dismantled that, try to come back to it. And make sure that your routine is realistic. If waking up at 5 a.m. to meditate, journal, and make a green smoothie is not realistic for you, don't make that your routine, right? Make the routine that is realistic for you. But please have a routine, and a routine doesn't have to be complicated. It can be 3, 4 easy things. Wake up at the same time. Do something short but meaningful for yourself in the morning. 5-minute journaling, drinking your coffee or tea without emails, sitting quietly and looking outside the window, listening to music, like anything that is yours in the morning. Eat well and go to sleep at the same time. Like that is the most basic routine that you can have, and that is impactful. And then find some way to reconnect with your hobbies. Find a way to like go back to creativity because that can be very nourishing and it can be a cool, fun activity you do indoors. In wintertime, we feel like we want to isolate and, we're kind of blah. We don't feel like getting dressed, all of those things. But in that, you want to like activate something called opposite action, which is do the opposite thing that you're feeling. So if you feel like avoiding your friends, reach out to them. If you feel like just being blah on the couch, get up and stretch. If you feel like, staying up and scrolling on Instagram, put your phone away and read a book. That's like an actual paper book. Practice some mindfulness relaxation techniques. I know that is helpful all year round, but in the wintertime, it can be especially helpful in grounding some of those feelings. I talked about opposite action a little bit earlier, but really, like if you feel like just kind of staying at home and skipping that workout, get up and do the workout. Like opposite action is a really powerful technique from something called dialectical behavior therapy. And it is really powerful in motivating us because sometimes we think that the motivation needs to come before the action. Like I need to feel motivated and then I'll do the action. But a lot of times the action will bring up the motivation. So if you do the thing, you will then continue to feel motivated to do it. So if you are somebody who's like, oh, I'm not in the mood to journal, like I can't focus, I have to wait until I feel like I should journal. Do the journaling, and then you'll notice that your motivation to journal is going to start increasing internally. This one was really challenging for me leading into winter joy because I grew up in the Middle East, and which is just, there was no winter there. And so the concept of having fun in winter was just very foreign to me. And the concept of being outside in the snow felt awful to me. And I really had to reframe that. And I had to be like, you know what? There are beautiful, unique things about winter, about the cold weather that I can't get during the summer. So I should lean into that, right? And making sure that you're prepared for winter is the best way to have fun in winter. So just have warm clothes. That way you can go outside, you can appreciate the winter markets, you can go ice skating or whatever it is, but try to find like winter joy. And the Scandinavian culture has tons of activities and examples of what you can do to appreciate the winter. So I definitely like recommend looking those things up. And we can send it in the email as well. Make medical appointments. The beginning of the year is a really good time to set up all of your medical appointments over the span of January to March. That way you can make sure that everything is okay, that you can make sure it's not seasonal affective versus depression versus just feeling sad. And you can make sure that you have enough vitamin D or iron or magnesium in your body so that, okay, like, you know what, if I don't have that, maybe I should take supplements and your doctor can recommend. And finally, because we'll be spending so much time indoors, make the place somewhere you want to be. And it doesn't have to be gorgeous and it doesn't have to be a mansion. You know, if you're somebody who's living with roommates, that's totally fine too. Your personal living space should be something you feel comfortable in. And you don't have to like break the bank doing it, but you know, cozy textures, relaxing scent, soothing environments like color or painting, things that make you feel comfortable, like things that you can feel joy in. Make sure that you invest some of that energy into making your living space cozy and comfortable so that you enjoy being there, so that you look forward to being there. And you just kind of saw me pull up this blanket. Like I always have a blanket near me. I have my candle. In the wintertime, especially in the wintertime, I like buying, you know, flowers once a week or once every 2 weeks. And they don't have to be expensive bouquets. You can get like the $10 mini bouquets at Trader Joe's, Whole Foods, your grocery store, wherever. But that will just make you feel more grounded in your living space. And in my last slide, before we break into the convo, this is one of my favorite quotes. He's like a philosopher, Albert Camus. And essentially, this quote is like a good reminder for me because, again, like I used to struggle a lot with winter because just essentially where I grew up. In the winter time, if we can really connect with ourselves, ground ourselves, take care of our health, build habits, you know, over the span of the first 3 months of the year, we can really prepare for the rest of the year. Like we can really find our strength and our resilience. And these healthy habits will take us into the spring, summer, and fall and change the quality of our whole year. And again, like it doesn't have to happen in the first 2 weeks of the year. It's, you know, you can take the whole month of January, you can even take January to March, but really like in the depth of winter, we can really find and connect with our coping. So I really love this quote for that reason. So Jackie, this brings me to the end. I'll stop the share so we can have a convo without the slides in the back, but let's go into the questions.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Isra, first and foremost. We so appreciate all of that fantastic information. I think there were so many tangible things that people can take from this to start to implement into their daily lives, their routines in preparation for winter. Some of the ones that I loved the most was just making plans to look forward to in these months where sometimes there's that stretch before summer and winter and it just gets long.
Mhm.
So having those traditions that you can implement and things to do. And I loved when you said, you know, you're warming up in January. And that is so great because I think sometimes we get these unrealistic expectations that we need to jump into the new year and transform our lives and correct all of the things maybe we didn't love about the last year. And that is so much pressure. I want to uplift a comment that was in the chat that someone had said the holidays can be really rough for a lot of people. I feel like there's a lot of forced positivity that if you don't feel that way, it's really hard to keep up with. You feel like something's wrong with you sometimes. And I think that can be said for so many people, just
Mhm.
these expectations of the holidays and then even leading into the new year of you're seeing people try new challenges or do new things or implement new changes in their lives. And sometimes when it's those intense changes that are really drastic, you know, it's not sustainable for our physical or mental health. So thank you for just offering so much advice on how people can go about, you know, moving into the new year more mindfully. I have a couple questions. I know we don't have too much time, but one question that I would love to bring to you, and a few people have been mentioning things about technology, and I think it plays an important role here, in different ways. And I just love your perspective that what you see technology's impact being on in our moods during these winter months. I know that we can use it to benefit us, to stay connected, to provide entertainment, those types of things. But how do we do that without allowing it to push further into isolation?
Yeah, one of the things I really like saying and reminding myself as well as somebody who creates digital content all the
Yeah.
time, on technology all the time, is there's a big difference in being connected and having connection. So
Mm.
social media connections can definitely make us feel connected, but they're not always making us feel connected. Sometimes we're just passively watching people's lives. And, we mistake that as entertainment, but it's a way to just really numb ourselves, right? And
Yeah.
so what's important is to have really, really firm boundaries on time limitations on your use of technology, specifically social media. So yeah, if you want to scroll, absolutely scroll, but put a time limit on it. Either you do an hour a day throughout the day, or you just do a 20-minute, whatever. It's totally up to you, but I think they say there's some research that says like 20 minutes-ish is like the healthy mark, which is very low. I understand that. But for sure, like just slowly build up to it. If you're spending 2 hours on social media, cut it down to an hour and a half, and then move to an hour and all of that. And the other thing I'll say is don't replace in real life connections with technology-based connections. So yes, they are there and they can be extremely helpful, especially if you live in like isolated communities where there's nobody you can access who's like you.
Okay.
Absolutely. But try to find real life connections as well that require you to meet people in real time instead of only having social media connections. And the last thing I'll say quickly is the blue light on our phones really messes up our sleep. And again, I'm not saying this from a high horse, like this is like something I struggle with myself. I have like time blocks on my social media apps. The blue light does affect our sleep. So if you are somebody who is using, your phone a lot or screens a lot, the smallest change if you can make that I would say really start with is don't use it before going to sleep. Because that will have like a domino effect. If you can improve your sleep, you're going to start feeling better. You'll have more energy to go out and all those things.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Those are great tips and good things for us to keep in mind too, as you're thinking about small goals and small changes and things that you can implement in your day-to-day life. I know for me, setting technology limits has been super helpful, of just those reminders because you can get caught in the doom scroll and the trap, of that, especially when you're stuck indoors, and stuck in the cold and, it's easy to do. So that is a great suggestion. Thank you for that. I know we are almost at our time, so I don't want to jump into another question without us having a full amount of time, but you were able to provide us with so many great insights. I know most of the questions that were being asked in the chat were able to be answered, through the presentation. And I just want to say thank you to everyone for joining, for your wonderful comments, your openness and willingness to share with us. I really appreciated reading through everyone's suggestions, and just what everyone is going to start trying this new year. I know a lot of people asked about the recording and the slides. Just a reminder, those will be sent out to everyone within the week. You'll be getting an email from us with that. So you can look back on it, reference it, and please share it with other people too, and encourage them to watch. But thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you, Isra, for the fantastic hour. We really appreciate everything you shared.
Thanks for joining, everybody. And of course, if you have any follow-ups, please reach out. I'm always happy to chat. And I really appreciated the comments and the questions. So
Yeah.
I'm glad we had this conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you all. Have a wonderful rest of your day. And, these upcoming winter months, make sure you take care of yourselves. I know a lot of people are out there in the cold right now, so stay warm and happy and healthy.
Take care, everyone.